I've learned probably more from mistakes than I have from victories. You know, when you make a mistake, it's much more indelible on your brain than when you have a victory. When you have a victory, you think everything is so easy. In fact, I went along for years having nothing but victories. And then in 1990, the market crashed, and all of a sudden I said, what did I do wrong? The fact is that you learn much more. There was an article that was written about me in one of the major business magazines. Everything he touches turns to gold. And I read it and I believed it. I said, that's true. And then all of a sudden 1990 came around and I was struggling for my life. Friends of mine were going bankrupt. They were going out of business. You'll never hear from them again. And I was, struggling like crazy, and I didn't want to do that. And I ended up pulling through. I had an expression in 1990. I had the expression. I came up with it. It became quite famous, actually. Survive till 95. I felt if I could survive till 95, I'd be successful. And I was able to survive till 95. And so many talented friends of mine were gone and, literally never to be heard from again in my business. And they were very talented people, but they could not survive. They didn't have the strength. They didn't have the stamina. Perhaps they didn't have the brain. Perhaps they didn't have the luck. But they were not able to survive for a period of 5 years in a treacherous down market. I was able to do that, and now my company is much bigger, much stronger than it ever was before. I'm a much bigger presence than I ever was before. And, I have things now that I never dreamed possible. The west side of Manhattan, all of the buildings that I have in New York, buildings in Chicago, buildings going up now in California along the ocean. I mean, I have things now that I would have never thought possible. I owed billions of dollars in 1990, billions. $1 billion of it was personally guaranteed, which is even worse. And my company is much bigger and stronger than it ever was at any time in the 80s or 90s or any other time, by a factor of 3 or 4. So, it's to a certain extent, it's really survival and learning and taking knocks and sometimes learning business the hard way. The beauty of learning it the hard way is you never forget it. If you learn it the easy way, like, oh, gee, this is a success, everything's successful, this is really easy, I'm not sure you're really learning anything, because ultimately you think it's just a very easy game to play, and it's not. The beauty of what I went through in the early 90s and the struggle that I had in the early 90s is that now I appreciate my success. Where in 1989, where I had had a decade of great success also, I didn't appreciate my success. I didn't care about my success. I thought it was very easy. I assumed it would always happen. But the beauty of what took place is that by my having a tough time in the early 90s, I now appreciate what I've done much more so than if I didn't go through that period. I'm actually glad I went through that period. I wouldn't want to do it again, but I'm glad I went through that period.